went to school in Plano, Texas, growing up, which is a pretty competitive school system, I would say. Um, and that's kind of where I started wanting to do, as we mentioned briefly before, electrical and computer engineering and this kind of thing. And so after high school, I ended up going to Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh, where I was doing a lot of robotics related work. Um, After college, I kind of transitioned more into software, and that's how I'm currently at Microsoft.
Wow. So how did you get interested in computer science and engineering?
So ever since I was really young, I just always knew I wanted to do something related to this. Um, I think like when I first got some exposure to industry work, especially between 11th and 12th grade, I interned at NASA down in Houston, Texas. And that's kind of where I thought, I really like this kind of work that I'm doing, and ended up kind of being drawn more towards this kind of thing like in college, like just through classes, through clubs, and then through internships in the summers and things like that. I kind of ended up doing this kind of thing more. And I think today it's also very fluid for anyone out there who's not sure exactly what they want to do yet. I think there's a lot of room to explore what you're interested in. So definitely just, like take some time, figure it out what it is that you're interested in.
That is such well said. And especially for our young people as our audience. So tell us a bit as you're discovering your interest growing up. I heard you like robotics and building things. And then what age did you have more clarity? And I know even when you were in college, you were not sure what to study, right? And yet you have some interest growing up. Give us a bit of a walk back in your memory lane. And then how did you get the intern in NASA as a high school student? That's phenomenal. So tell us a bit more.
Sure, absolutely. So the first one for like regarding interest, I think this is something that was really reassuring to me growing up as someone who wasn't sure what I wanted to work on. And I am the kind of person that likes to say I need to lock in something so that like I can commit to it and then go forward with it. But like a word of advice that I got from someone was simply that whatever your passion is, you're going to end up finding yourself spending a lot of time working on it, whether or not it's part of work related or school related or things like that. And so growing up, very early on, I had always been working with, like designing things. I loved playing with Legos, as I'm sure a lot of kids love Legos growing up. But like, um, I think my parents were really supportive in that they let me do a lot of the things that I liked. Like obviously like there's a good healthy balance, but they were not the kind of like parents who said I could not play any video games or anything like that. Through a lot of these things, for example, I also have younger siblings as well. I have three. And so one of my youngest was starting to learn and work with robotics. I was able to help, like I was helping coach their team, and I just found a lot of reward in that, and I thought it was really interesting. So I would say it's really hard for me to pinpoint an exact age when I said, hey, this is when I want to go into electrical and computer engineering. But I would say from a very early on, everyone kind of knows certain things that they're interested in. And I think it's just more about realizing what it is that you want to do as you're growing up. Like, hey, what is it that I'm spending a lot of time thinking about? What is it that keeps me up at night because I'm trying to like figure out how to do, or what gets me up in the morning when I get up out of bed?
That is so well said. Thank you, Kai. I would always ask, and when parents ask me, how to help youth to find their interest, and I would say, or adults or anyone, I said, if you have a free day that you don't have to do anything, what would you like to do other than, resting, eating, games and such? What would be that thing that you love to do and exactly your experience that you find yourself inclining and just enjoy doing those things? And that interest over time would take shape and end up becoming your career, because that's what you're passionate about.
Absolutely. Yes. I totally agree with that. I think if you end up getting drawn towards something in your free time, that's definitely what you're interested in doing.
Exactly. Beautiful. And you mentioned, so you're the oldest and you have three younger siblings.
That's correct.
And I love how you didn't just enjoy doing what you love to do for yourself. You're actually a coach for the robotics team or for the younger siblings, similar interest.
Yeah, so I definitely think it's very rewarding for me personally to be able to serve others as well. And I think in whatever capacity that kind of like ends up going into the other things that I work on, I think there's a lot of joy in being able to serve others, whether it's like, like kids on a robotics team or, like volunteering in the community as well. I think a lot of these interests don't have to be exclusive from each other. I think it's really nice to be able to combine a lot of these things.
I love that. You and I didn't really rehearse, and yet we have so many similar ideas. The same thing you do, you can have multiple benefits. And we call the life of integration or convergence. They are not separate. They all build on each other. As you're serving, using your talent and your interest, you got joy from it and you help others and you enjoy it.
Absolutely.
Beautiful. Thank you for a role model for our young people of serving. Because in our youth camp on Zoom, Uncle Ming also encouraged the young people to do community service projects. And he even reward them with Amazon points and such. So he's such a very generous coach for our young people. Give us some idea on things that you have served in over the years.
Sure. So I was very involved in church growing up. So a lot of my serving came through there. Actually, Uncle Ming is actually like one of my dearest mentors from church, from CCCFC. And so a lot of the work, it comes through there. And then also there's like volunteering communities throughout like college and beyond. I think growing up, especially in middle and high school, it's a lot easier to feel like you're kind of being like, like pulled in certain directions. And so like for me too, like I felt like more during college is when I was able to explore the different ways I was able to serve but still a lot through the community and church. I was, like serving through whether it was like helping with the worship team or with just other things. I think mostly through church, but like also, like I mentioned before, some with volunteering, with whether it's like helping out with like robotics teams or other nonprofits.
That is beautiful. In our youth camp on Zoom, you know how Uncle Ming and we define success, and it seemed to be the life you're living. We define success as fully using the gift that God has given you to the fullest potential, to honor God and to bless others. And I'm seeing and hearing that you are using your passion and your God-given gifts to serve others and honor God. Thank you. So earlier you mentioned how your parents didn't stop you from playing game per se, and you mentioned sound like some very admirable parenting qualities that we love to learn more about. Tell us about your relationship with your parents and how you have grown up in your family, the way that they have parented you.
Sure. I think my parents are both Christians as well. And so they've grown up, they've raised me in such a way, I believe. And I think the most important thing that I love about my parents is that I really trust them. And I think they are a really good example of like following in the way that Christ loves us and in loving us in that way. I think, well, not so with the video games example, I was just more meaning that like they're very like open to like exploring like things that like we're interested in, and they'll still obviously very much encourage us in good ways to have healthy, like living just habits and things like that, and for studying and things. But it's very much in the sense of encouragement. They're very encouraging overall of like kind of what we want to explore in life through studies, through work. I would say um, a lot that's kind of like the thing that stands out to me a lot. Like with, you know, four siblings, we all have ended up being kind of sort of interested in different things. And, you know, I'm getting to that age now where I realize that's really difficult for them to have been able to encourage, you know, because everyone's got different personalities, everyone has different interests and at different points in life, different struggles. But the biggest thing I think is that my parents really try to reflect the love of Christ. And I think that's really important for me.
That is so
Hi.
beautiful. Go ahead, please, Pastor Lee.
Um, Allow me to just, you use the word, you trust your parents implicitly or as a son. Can you give another example? I mean, it's very rare that the people that young people that says, I trust my parents.
Yeah, trust my parents. Yeah, absolutely. I think in a lot of situations, I think that in a lot of times parents are kind of seen as you know, like the people in charge, and so there's definitely authority submitted to your parents, but it feels like there's a little bit of a barrier. But I have always been very open and feel very comfortable with sharing a lot of struggles with my parents. I think it's really important to be honest, and something that I really appreciate is that my parents prefer me to and expect me to be honest with them, and they can be honest back with me. And so in terms of trust, like I just feel like I can come for them with anything that I'm struggling with, whether or not it's easy to talk about. And I think that like helps them to support me more and helps me be able to communicate better with them as well.
You never hide anything from them?
Well, you know, like some things that obviously come up, and you know, like I've definitely had times where I was like playing like Game Boy in bed or like at night alone, that kind of thing. But the thing that's important is, and obviously there's a personal aspect to this as well, and like how much you're able to feel like you're able to share with your parents. But I feel like there's a lot of things that I'm just simply able to share with my parents.
Okay, thank you.
That is such an important factor, trust. In fact, on our Sunday parenting leadership class, we spent quite a bit of time talking about building trust in a family. And I really admire and appreciate what you have shared. And we probably want to interview your parents with you. How did they do it? How did they? So I believe as you talk about, you are encouraged to share struggles, ups and downs, challenges, the good, bad, and the ugly. And I believe your parents really reflect the love of Christ, and their response to what you share was encouraging. They were listening. It wasn't judging, criticizing. How could you do that? Turning you down, but they really encouraged you to share. Tell us more. Would you say so?
Yeah, absolutely. I think part of being able to build that trust, as you were saying, between my parents and me was a lot of understanding that if there's something that I was doing wrong, that my parents were willing to come forward and forgive, just as God forgave us. And I believe that that was really instrumental in me being able to feel that amount of trust with my parents, because I definitely feel like there are cases where, you know, if someone's done something wrong and they like share with their parents, I know the initial reaction might be to be angry or to be upset. And sometimes my parents are like that too. But I think overall, just the understanding that we can always come back together in forgiveness and just being able to communicate as well, I think that's really important.
That is so powerful. Thank you, Kai. It really melts my heart. And for those of us who are parents or adults on the call, we are learning so much from Kai and his family. Thank you for sharing that. And you were honest to say they were not perfect. I don't believe they're a perfect parent per se. And they would react sometimes with emotion. And then they learn, and you all come back together, back to the foot of the cross, back to the forgiveness of Christ. Go ahead.
Absolutely. And I think it's definitely like both how they interact with me and how I interact with them has improved over the years. I think we're all like in this stage of learning because, you know, like I am also like the eldest child, and so they haven't had any experience before this as well. But I do think that yeah, like none of us are perfect, but definitely like learning. And I think I really appreciate my parents for that.
Amen. I'm going to put a plug in the phrase that I said all the time. We cannot be perfect parents, and yet we need to be praying parents. And I believe your parents are praying parents, even though they may not be perfect.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so like even especially like on that subject, for example, like my parents will always like be praying as like a family, like before meals and things like that. And so like definitely like the fact that they acknowledge that they're not perfect either, and that we understand that too, like really helps our relationship.
So well said. And to your point about still learning and growing, and you're the oldest. They're learning by trial and error.
I'm the
You're the guinea pig, you're the little mouse. And yet I know you both grow together. And I always said, parents are learning. We are learning, right? So we are all in the school of life together. We're just your earlier students in life than you are. We're fellow classmates, you know, just different grades.
Yes, absolutely.
So
Can
tell
I
us,
interject another
please,
question?
please.
Yeah. I don't, I'm not trying to play good cop, bad cop, the interviewing stuff, but I'm just, in what way your parents that convince you that they're genuine Christians? I mean that you said that you spoke very favorably of your parents in their modeling of what their faith,
Mhm.
and give us one example. I mean,
Okay, yeah, sure. I mean, I think for my parents as well as anyone else, there's really no way to know whether or not someone is Christian, and or we should not be like judging based on that either. But what I do think is that my parents definitely show growth in the fruits of the Spirit. Um, and I think especially for if I really want to call my parents out, hopefully they're not on this call, and if they are, they won't be embarrassed by this. But for example, my dad could be very impatient sometimes, and especially as fathers are, they definitely want you to grow up, and you know, like they want the best for you, and they want like things to work out for you. But a lot of times before, my dad um, would not be as patient. And I think I've definitely seen him change throughout the years through him also being discipled and discipling others in the Christian community, going through church, things like that. Even my dad leading a small group. There's a lot of these like small things that you kind of see that are improvements that you're like, oh, it could be that he's a genuine Christian. It could not still, like, for example, just learning how to pray better and things like that. But I think the most important thing is showing that he's like bearing fruit in the Spirit, and that like before, like, you know, when I was really young, if I had done something wrong, he might be really upset, and like, I mean, he might just like get mad. But like recently, and like more and more, like he's understands patience, love, like of these things that like you definitely see people like grow in the Spirit, if they're Christian. That's kind of how I feel.
thank you.
Beautiful. And I want to really highlight your point about growing. And I really appreciate your mature comment that none of us can quote unquote judge or assess how mature they are in their Christian faith or their relationship with God. It's not for us to tell, it's for God to see it in our heart. And then I really like your point about they're growing, comparing themselves from the past to the present. Instead of comparing your dad with somebody else's dad, we don't ever want to compare with other people, because the more you compare, the more you get frustrated. So we want to really appreciate how they're growing from where they were in the past and where they are now in the present, and even hoping and praying for the future growth going forward. Thank you for sharing those very mature thoughts. So
Thank you.
Pastor Lee, continue to be the bad cop, no problem. Kai, it's ready, take it on.
Yeah, please.
But you never got angry when your parents disciplined you?
Oh, absolutely. I did.
But how do you prevent it from going to hate your parents? Because a lot of other kids do that.
Oh, going to hate your parents. Okay, well, actually, that's an interesting question, and I think that definitely goes both ways for parents and kids. I would say on the parents' side, what I feel like my parents didn't do as well before, but are learning better now, is to how to communicate and to resolve these things after we fight, after we disagree on these things where like ugly words might be said or people get angry at each other. They're much better about resolving things in that, like whether or not, because I think it's very hard for us to reconcile and like in those cases where might have fights and you just kind of walk away, then that's much harder to build that kind of trust that you were talking about, to be able to trust the other person that they might forgive you and that like they can kind of see your side. Personally, from on the children's side too, it can be very difficult because like parents are learning too, and not everyone's perfect at resolving arguments, and I can see how it's possible to kind of start to build resentment for your parents if you feel like they're not resolving these fights correctly. And it's possible that they're learning as well, right? Like it's possible that they're not resolving these in the best ways possible, but it's also really important to find in your heart to forgive them, to understand that parents are also learning at this too. And I think it definitely gets better as you get older, as you start seeing your parents as like, oh, these people who, because there's a certain difference when you're younger and you expect your parents to be perfect and then they act a certain way and you're like, this is not like how you should be acting, and build that sort of resentment. But I feel like as you get older and you start seeing them not just as parents, but also as friends and people in Christ, there's definitely a part on the children that like you have to be forgiving as well. You have to be understanding that they're trying their best, that they really do want what's best for you.
Wow, very powerful, very mature thought. Because I heard a few key words. You have given so much credit to your parents as forgiving, and I see so much forgiving in you. And as a family, you're so right. Both the parent and the children together need to be forgiving to each other.
Absolutely.
As like you said before, Christ has forgiven us. Who are we not to forgive others? And you have really lived that in your family together, both giving each other grace, give each other space, giving each other second, third, and multiple chances to grow, even when we make mistakes. And that you didn't perhaps set an expectation and then feel disappointed when your parents didn't meet those expectations. You may when you were younger, and now more mature, and when you're older, you learn to accept and understand and be gracious. That is powerful. Another point you mentioned, I love that word. You said not just as the children and the parents, you said as a friend. That is also my goal, and how I build relationship with my children as friends. And I always tell parents, we have the advantage. We are quote unquote stuck with them and we're friends for life, because your other friends could come and go, right? Elementary school friends, high school, college, and maybe longer term friends too. And yet your parents are with you forever, whether you like it or not. Let's make it good.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think that's what also makes it really interesting, because your parents love you as a son or daughter, but also as someone who really, really genuinely wants to see you improve and wants the best for you.
Yes, yes. Parents always have the good intention and want the best for you, and yet it may not always come out right. Like you mentioned, they may not have communicated properly. Because in Chinese, parents could say, 我都是为你好的. I always want this for your good. And yet we didn't come out right as parents, that we ended up imposing unnecessary pressure to our young people. Even though we have the best intention at heart, we may not come out right, because you did mention about the communication. So we want to dive into that a bit later on as well. And then you also mentioned how we are fellow believers in Christ. And in fact, in our family, we don't just call each other parents and children. We call each other brother and sister in Christ. That's a very beautiful identity and relationship we have. So let's go back to the communication topic. Very powerful topic. When you mentioned how your parents may not have communicated well, can you give us some compare and contrast examples where how they communicated not so well in the past and how they may have now grown and improved, like you said earlier? Just a couple of examples.
From my parents or me?
Both of you.
Oh, okay, yeah, sure. Yeah, so like for example, like there were some rough spots, like just because in like during like middle school and maybe a bit of high school for myself, just going through a lot of pressures in school, you know, like in a lot of these things outside of school as well, where, you know, like my parents and I would fight more than before. And so I think there are definitely some of these fights that like from early on where if communication was poor, I would get angry. My parents get angry, you know, because I'm getting angry, and then I get more angry because my parents are angry, and then this just goes on. But I think like before, like poor communication was that where, you know, like one of us would just walk off. Like maybe my dad would just like, you know, like leave the room, or I would leave the room, and that kind of thing. But I think like communication can feel really difficult because as you're going through a lot of these emotions and you're not necessarily thinking clearly, it's kind of difficult to understand and how to articulate your words correctly and how to express yourself correctly. And I think really the first step to that is just really being open to communication. I think for both parents and children, I think it's important to be able to kind of express how you feel and why you feel that way, and just be open to understanding about the other party as well. And it's definitely okay not to immediately have that conversation, maybe because everyone can be really angry as well. But in my family, I think that's something that I really appreciate that my dad does really well now, and that I feel like he's really grown from before. In that case, for example, like my dad would used to just like, you know, get angry a lot more quickly, but he's like a lot more patient now to like understand me. And also I feel like that in turn has actually taught me how to better conflict resolve myself, and being patient, you know, back towards my parents, towards others as well.
How come
Wow.
you don't talk about your mother?
So actually my mom and I like have a different relationship with my dad and I think just being men and like growing up in the house, like I fought more with my dad. But my mom has, I mean, like no discredit to my mom, like she's definitely been there just as much as my dad. Like there's certain things that I feel more comfortable talking with my mom about just because of personality and with, you know, like what we've talked about. But my mom and I have a really good relationship.
Hey, yeah, amen.
Pastor B, continue to play the bad cop.
No, go.
No.
I'm all for it. I love these questions. You know, these cover things that I haven't thought about. So like, I appreciate it and I welcome it.
And
Well,
I admire how you're thinking on your feet and
Yeah.
just giving us such genuine and honest answer. It's starting to get really good when you talk about the fights, because we know real families fight.
Absolutely.
Sorry, Pastor Lee, keep going. You're
Yeah.
saying?
Well, you know that I want to be a psychiatrist. And so anyway.
Okay. Okay.
Anyway, but I end up with gone into anesthesia where my patient don't talk. So
Oh.
yeah, but if you don't send me Microsoft what do you call the Office the code, I'm going to send the video to your dad.
Okay, I will find you a code for sure.
Oh, thank you. Okay, well, all right. Well,
yeah, but yeah, feel free to send this to my
that
dad.
is very unusual. That's why it draws my attention, because no, there are a lot of children that much closer to their mother, and you do have that. Elaine talked about Chinese parents.
Hmm.
A lot of the kids or Asian kids who grow up in America, feel that like the Asian parents have unreasonable expectations and give them a lot of pressures, expectations. Just share with the rest of us, how do you deal with that, or whether that happened to you?
You know, like that's actually the thing. I feel like, at least among my friends and other people who I interacted with through like peers and people in school, my parents did not place that sort of expectation on me where they said you must get a certain grade, or you must do this or that. I think they did place importance on like you kind of must like know what you're interested in, and do the kind of thing that you're interested in. And there are a couple of things that I think where this is a gray area. Like, for example, my parents I think were opposed to any of us going to any sort of like art school, because they said, oh, like it's difficult to like make money in these areas, things like that. So they're definitely but like personally, I think I've been sort of really just kind of lucky in this aspect, because I haven't had a situation where any of these big things disagreed with how my parents raised me in terms of expectations. There's definitely like, my parents did, like as a lot of Asian parents do, feel like the need to be good parents and kind of like nudge you to be like, hey, like you need like I really want you to do well in these like things like SATs, or whether it's like tests, or like encouraging me to do like extracurriculars and things like that. But I really don't feel like my parents were super like rigid in setting sort of like unrealistic expectations. Like in fact, I don't think my parents really looked at my grades that often, which maybe was more of a blessing for me personally. But they weren't super like focused down on like, hey, like are you getting hundreds in all of your tests or things like that. But there was a lot of care in like, are you doing things that you kind of want to do, and they were exploring this as well, because, you know, as the oldest child, this is kind of like their first experience of raising a kid in the American education system.
Say something 2 or 3 minutes about that our young people can show it to their parents who tend to focus on their grades.
Oh, okay.
So like people like Matthew can turn and say, hey, Kai's dad says this.
I see. For parents, I would say the biggest thing is also trust in the Lord, that he's watching your kid. Also trust in your kid that that your son or daughter, that they're trying their best as well. And a lot of times they are going through a lot of difficult things, as I'm sure you're aware, and they might not express it well either, just as you might not express it well. But they are trying their best in a lot of things. You know, like they're whatever path they have to success could be very different these days than kind of what you expect. Of course, it's difficult for any parent to see their kid not necessarily doing well in a certain thing that they think you should be doing well in, and therefore struggling. Obviously, as a parent, it's like, I totally understand that you would you know, want your son or daughter to be succeeding in these things, and just have patience, have trust, and work together. Kind of think yourself as like a team.
Thank you. All right, Elaine, you can talk about mother.
The good cop coming back, huh?
Yes.
So I just am so aligned to all that you shared. I do want to draw a suggestion. When you say you're lucky, that's where I don't align, because I prefer, for us Christians, do not use the word lucky. And my children, my students know that, because we don't want to trust in luck. I would say you're fortunate or you're blessed to have your parents, if I may clarify that.
Yeah, like that's a blessing, and I've said it before and I'll say it again, but I just, yeah, I mean, in terms of like, we haven't had any sort of these like conflicts, but it's definitely a blessing.
Amen. Thank you. I want to go back to the communication topic earlier. I heard the importance of what you have learned in your communication at home was changing from being emotional, upset, and the vicious cycle, right? I got mad, you got mad, we all got mad, and we got just really downward spiral. The past and how you grow over time to learn to be calm and be cool and manage your emotion, and may take a break and come back to talk about it later, and that you're open-minded, that you will listen to each other. That is very powerful. I want to make sure we hear that and capture that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this really is due to my parents. Like, I think their leadership in this area has been really good, because, you know, like growing up, I wouldn't have been able to understand these things either. But at some point during our arguments, my dad and my mom, you know, like started stressing more that, hey, we need to have good communication. And I think that's kind of like them starting that first step in kind of helping us be like, hey, like what exactly is the problem here? It's not necessarily that, you know, we're like arguing about the thing that we were even originally arguing about. It's more about like, we need to just be able to like convey better thing to each other, you know, not even just because of like language or anything necessarily, but just being able to express ourselves.
Wow, such a wise family. I want to recap that. So at the end, you focus more on how you communicate with each other than the actual topic itself. Go ahead.
That definitely became a big part of it. A lot of these arguments, as I'm sure people know, like sometimes you end up arguing about things that are completely unrelated to whatever it is you were originally talking about. And sometimes people are just angry or upset or, you know, going through a lot of things. And so I think just being able to talk is very important.
Wow, this is really important for all of us to practice and think about. And to be honest, a lot of times what you may cause the argument isn't that important. And then we all got emotional and worked up about it, which is not worth it. And your family chose to focus more on how do we communicate and build relationship, more important than who's right, who's wrong, the actual subject itself. Is it what I heard?
Yeah, absolutely. And there's still times when that doesn't work perfectly. And you know, whether it's like emotions are running high and things like that, will you know, it's not always the easiest thing to do. In fact, it's sometimes very difficult to do, and it can still get out of hand like that. But I think like overall, it's like really important to try to be open.
Wow. So absolutely, we're human beings. So we're known to be imperfect, right? That's why Jesus came. That's why we're forgiven sinners. That's why we're work in progress. We're not all there yet. We will someday when we're in heaven together. So we need to give each other time and room to grow. So I really admire your family focusing on the how to communicate and building the relationship more so than the actual subject matter. In fact, in our family, we have a tradition when we fight, we have this fighting and argument anniversary. So we remember the date May 7th when my son and I fought. It's our fighting anniversary. We honestly do not remember what we fought about, but we remember the date to remind us not to get into that fight again, to really focus on the relationship more than the actual issue, who's winning or who's losing. Fascinating. We love to learn more about your life, especially how you become such a godly man. And I know you're not perfect, and yet you know how important your faith is. We want to learn more about that next time. How did you build up your faith to become who you are today? And we have so much to learn from you. And we want to ask the audience, are there any questions for Kai? And either you can type in or you can open up your microphone. Go ahead, please.
I just want to say, yeah, thanks for having me here, like being able to share my thoughts, and thanks for sharing your thoughts as well. Yeah, both Elaine and Pastor Jeff. And yeah, just feel free to ask me anything to the audience. Like, you know, like I might have gone through some very similar things that you guys might have. feel free to ask me anything.
Wow, we've got an open door. We got to take advantage of that. And Kai has been so honest and genuine, sharing his life and his family's life. And I'm so touched, and I've learned so much. And you are such an example for all the quote unquote theories and principles that we teach in the Sunday school. And you truly demonstrate how that can come true.